You have data everywhere, but is it working together? Meet Curator, the automotive industry's first unified intelligence engine. Curator unifies data from all corners of your dealership to transform marketing, sales, and customer interactions. See it today at goobagoo.com.
Welcome to Daily Drive for Tuesday, November 11th, 2025. I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Today on the show, two high-profile execs have left Tesla. Dutch officials visit China to end disputes over Nexperia, and inventories leap in November. Plus, our own Lawrence Iliff joins the show to talk about massive pay packages for both Tesla CEO Elon Musk and Rivian CEO RJ Scaringe, and whether that kind of compensation plan could spread in the auto industry.
These are companies that are kind of in between worlds, right? You know, they're kind of in between the auto industry, where you'd say, wait, that's way too much money. But they're kind of getting into the tech industry, or they want to get further into the tech industry.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry. Tesla has lost two key vehicle program leaders this week. Model Y program manager Emmanuel Lamacchia announced his departure on Sunday after nearly 8 years with the company. That came just hours after Cybertruck chief Siddhant Awasthi also said he was leaving. Lamacchia led global production and rollout of Tesla's best-selling Model Y, while Awasthi helped bring the long-delayed Cybertruck to market. Their exits add to a string of senior departures after Tesla shifts focus toward robotaxis and AI initiatives. Dutch officials will visit China to try to resolve the dispute over chipmaker Nexperia, whose ownership fight has disrupted global auto supply chains. Beijing urged the Netherlands to return control of Nexperia to Chinese parent Wingtech Technology, even as it eased export restrictions on the company's chips for civilian applications. The Dutch government seized Nexperia in September over national security concerns, a move that briefly halted shipments and forced automakers such as Honda to cut production. And U.S. new vehicle inventory climbed to 3.14 million at the start of November, up from 3.03 million a year earlier. According to LotLinks, inventory is up sharply from 2.8 million in October. The firm pegs overall supply at 70 days, compared with 67 last month. Several Stellantis brands now have more than a 100-day supply, while Toyota continues to run the tightest inventory at 33 days. EV stockpiles more than doubled to a 107-day supply as sales slowed, while hybrids held steady at 57 days, and combustion models slightly dipped to 72. And those are today's headlines. You can find more details on all those stories at autonews.com. As part of our centennial anniversary at Automotive News, our staff has been talking with executives, experts, and enthusiasts about the many ways the auto industry affects our lives, culture, and history as a country. Recently, Tech and Innovation Senior Editor Jerry Hirsch spoke with Jonathan Eisen, curator of the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles, about the marriage between cars and film. Jerry joins me now to talk about how Hollywood has shaped car culture here in the U.S. Jerry, welcome back to Daily Drive.
Thank you very much.
We'll hear some of this interview in the coming days here on Daily Drive, but first, talk about what drew you to the idea of the relationship between cars and Hollywood.
Well, there's this thing that we're celebrating this year, our 100th anniversary, which takes us back to 1925. But even before then, we started to see this relationship between cars and Hollywood and films. One of the first films to have a car chase in it was a silent film, and back in 1903, where this young couple elopes and the father jumps in his limousine and gives chase to try to stop them from getting to the church to get married, but he's foiled when the car breaks down. And ever since then, so that was 122 years ago, cars and Hollywood have been tied together because cars are such a part of our life. We express ourselves with the design and style of the car we drive. We use them every day. And so it's natural that they're going to be part of entertainment.
And as you were researching this topic and writing about your interview with Jonathan Eisen, was there anything that stood out or surprised you?
Yeah, there was something that surprised me. When you think about cars, and Hollywood, you think about cars that actually people drive. But some of the most interesting parts of the melding of these two industries are cars that people actually can't drive, but they say something about where society is at. And the Batmobile is the perfect example of this. Okay?
Yes.
You know anybody who's driven a Batmobile? You can drive an Oscar Mayer Wienermobile if you're lucky, but you can't drive a Batmobile. But if you look at from the comic books, to they became expressed in the television show in the 1960s, and then in cartoons and in all sorts of movies where I think, I don't know, a half dozen actors have been Batman, and each of those actors had their own distinct Batmobile. And you could see something about car styling and what's cool about cars in each iteration of the Batmobile. The first one, I think, looked like a 1960s Ford Thunderbird with tails, with beautiful red pinstripes all in black. And the latest ones look like rocket ships on wheels with jet engines blasting flames out of the back. So that's like the iconic car that talks to people through the ages about transportation and film.
Perfect. Jerry's write-up is titled How Hollywood Shaped Car Culture from Bullitt to Fast and Furious. You can find that and a video of his conversation with Peterson Museum curator Jonathan Eisen at autonews.com. Jerry, thank you so much for joining me on Daily Drive.
Glad to be with you.
Coming up, our own Lawrence Iliff joins the show to talk about the massive compensation plans that shareholders just approved for Tesla's Elon Musk and Rivian's RJ Scaringe, and what they mean for the wider auto industry. That's next on Daily Drive.
Your dealership has no shortage of customer information. But when that data is conflicting, messy, and spread across a multitude of platforms, it's impossible to activate properly. As the automotive industry's first unified intelligence engine, Curator enriches and unifies your customer data across platforms, like your CRM, your DMS, your website, and even your marketing efforts. It then injects that information back into your most vital systems to provide a single view of each customer and equip your sales team with the information they need to close a deal. When one of the largest volume Subaru dealers in the country wanted to tap into its data goldmine, they turned to Curator. In just 4 months, Huberger Subaru experienced a 55% higher closing ratio and a return of 15 times their investment. Want to see it for yourself? Check out the case study at goobagoo.com/curator. That's GUBAGOO.com/curator.
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Kellen Walker. Tesla's Elon Musk and Rivian's RJ Scaringe will both get new pay packages worth billions of dollars. Musk's deal could reach as high as $1 trillion over the next decade, while Scaringe's plan tops $4.5 billion. Both are built around bold performance goals and big bets on vision, growth, and innovation. Lawrence Iliff covers both Tesla and Rivian for us at Automotive News. He spoke with our own Jake Neer about what these deals mean for investors, the wider auto industry, and the growing overlap between Silicon Valley and Detroit.
Lonnie Iliff, welcome back to Daily Drive.
It's great to be here.
All right, so in the recent days, we've been hearing about these huge pay packages. First, Elon Musk, which we've been hearing about for quite a while now, the idea that he could essentially bring in up to $1 trillion based on certain benchmarks and performance. And now RJ Scaringe is getting a huge payday as well. I'm curious, when it comes to these pay packages that could reach into the billions or, again, $1 trillion in Musk's case, what is actually driving these massive pay structures?
Okay, so basically what's driving it is Silicon Valley, right? And so you have people who don't see themselves as like traditional auto, right? Traditional auto, CEOs are managers. There's obviously a vision, but they're thinking about the short term and the medium term, the long term and revenue. And, for their efforts, they usually get paid in the double digit millions, right? So, 10 million, 20 million. It's still a lot of money, sure. That's salary, stock options, bonuses, etc. And then, particularly Elon Musk, and then I'll go into Rivian, but particularly Elon Musk, obviously he was founded in Silicon Valley, and he's obviously a tech entrepreneur. He doesn't see himself as, running an auto company. He sees himself running a robot company with AI. And this is kind of a logical pivot. I mean, at least in terms of the timing, right? Tesla is very much like now, like this year, talking about this pivot to becoming a AI and robotics company. And if you look at their valuation, 1.4 trillion, 1.5 trillion, 80% of that, or maybe even a little more, is based on the future, not on the present, not on selling, 1.6 million cars or battery storage or whatever, right? And so he's talking about doing this crazy thing, like we hear with AI, right? With, open AI or, Google Gemini or whatever, these companies talking about, multiplying the size of their companies, right? And so for Tesla, it would go from like 1.4 trillion to 8.5 trillion, right? So, I add 7 trillion to the company and I keep one. And the idea is that only Elon Musk could do this, right? I mean, without his vision, without all that stuff, who's going to come in and, run Tesla and maintain that, effervescence in the stock market, right? The stock price is so high that you have to have this vision for the future. So they wanted to lock him in. He's got a lot of other companies and stuff. And then with RJ Scaringe over at Rivian, it's different. It's kind of structured the same, although they haven't given as many details because they don't have to, the way they're structured. And part of it is they're giving him this pay package that's worth, up to 4.6 billion with a B. And he would have to add 3 billion to the value of the company, right? So he would get his slice. And so this is kind of all on paper, which is interesting, right? It's not like, these companies have to write a check, right? This is stock and then it vests and you have to meet these obligations and stuff. So, I mean, the short answer is they are structuring these like tech companies.
That's interesting. Now, going back to your first response there, I think it's pretty clear to most people listening to this show what Elon Musk means to Tesla as a company and as a brand and its personality. But what about RJ Scaringe? What does he mean for Rivian? And do Rivian and its investors see him similarly tied to the company's success?
I think so, but obviously on a much smaller scale, right? Rivian had its IPO in 2021 and the stock is down like 85%. They haven't met, any of their sales goals or anything like that. RJ Scaringe did cut that deal with Volkswagen. He's really tied to the brand. He's tied to the design. He's tied to the ethos. He's out there. He's a public figure. There's really nobody, within the company you would see like as a successor or, anything like that. And so I think, that kind of the leverage he has is that he is really tied to the company, to the future of the company. And I think that, some of these companies, I think, maybe they won't survive without their founders, or at least there's a fear that they won't survive without their founders, that they are so infused with this, energy, vision, whatever it is, that you have to keep them. And so, they want, a larger piece of the company. And some tech companies, structure their companies at the beginning so that the founders get like insanely rich automatically. And so I think this is these are kind of revisions going back and saying, well, we have to revise this. And this pay package for RJ Scaringe comes specifically because the board didn't think he'd meet the old pay package thresholds, milestones, because the company's not doing that great. So there's some ambiguity there, right? It's like we're giving him a bunch of money because now, that milestones are too high. So we have to lower the milestones that he meets them, but we still need them. And I guess, for both Tesla and Rivian, it locks them in for 10 years.
Yeah. It's interesting because in both of these cases, it's a matter of value that's really tied up in vision, right? That obviously for Tesla, Elon Musk's vision and promises to shareholders and things like that, that's what's driving the value of the company in so many ways. And with RJ Scaringe, I mean, he's a brilliant guy. And it seems like his vision is Rivian's vision, that the two are not, the two are so intertwined that they're sort of one thing, as the founder of the company and so forth. So you have this strange intangible sort of thing to put a value on, that, and it's fascinating to watch it play out.
Yeah, and I think, this is kind of, part of the new industry, right? Detroit's been around for a long time, and it's just more of kind of a manager philosophy, right? Obviously there's vision. I'm not, downgrading anything that they do. It's extremely difficult, but kind of, be a good manager, manage the finances operationally, what are the next vehicles, etc. And with these guys, it's just like, the moonshots or a Mars shot. And I think part of it is the time we live in, with AI and robo taxis. These are new companies based on completely different philosophies about transportation, about mobility, about what the future is going to look like. And so I think there's some logic there, when you look at Facebook or Google, or, when you look at how these companies were founded and their ethos and how, extremely wealthy, Jeff Bezos, etc. I think it does make some sense. I think it's difficult in the auto industry though, because you know you can only make so much money selling cars. I mean, look at Toyota, right? Why isn't Toyota valued much higher than Tesla? They sell incredible amount of cars. They're extremely successful. Their cars are very good. They're a global company. And so I think there is some disconnect there potentially, right? That you are going to make insane amounts of money and multiply the size of the company by 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, selling cars.
So I'm curious. Obviously, the shareholders have approved these pay packages, and whether they'll stand, of course, is another question. But how are shareholders across the board reacting to these packages? Is because there were some pretty high profile holdouts in the in among shareholders and sort of groups of shareholders for these. And then maybe even bigger, how much patience do you think, Elon Musk and RJ Scaringe will receive from shareholders based on sort of the size and the scope of these packages?
I think there has been a lot of criticism. Like, if you just look at the size of Musk package, right? $1 trillion. It's like, you know, that is a big dilution on the stock, right? That's a big risk for stockholders. That's a big part of the growth that they're talking about. And so the shareholder groups or the shareholder advisory groups that came out against it said, it's wild, it's egregious, it's too much money. It's locking the company in on like one guy. It's creating like a big risk that you're putting it all into one guy. We're all human beings, right? And so I think at the end of the day, 75% or so, or a little more, of Tesla shareholders, said, let's do it. It's Elon's company, he has this vision for the robots, et cetera. I do understand that, right? The valuation is so high that if you don't lock Elon in and his vision, then I mean, that's also very it could be scary for shareholders without Elon Musk heading the company and being engaged. I think for Rivian, I've seen a lot of criticism saying, the company hasn't performed very well in terms, financially. It's way down from its IPO. Sales are down this year. They just had 600 layoffs, right, going into Thanksgiving and the holidays, and then he gets a big pay package. That maybe the optics are bad.
Well,
but
the
stock
EV
price didn't
market
move.
happens to be sort of
Yeah.
just completely stagnant at the moment. So
Right, exactly, the EV market. But I think on the other side of it is, this is paper. This is money on paper. You don't have to give him money. If he doesn't perform, he doesn't get any money. I think there's kind of a strong argument there, especially since with Scaringe pay package, even though $4 billion or $5 billion, an insane amount of money, right? he would have to, grow the company, stratospherically, and everybody would get on the gravy train, right? It's not like a company is in trouble and you give some guy a bunch of money to leave, right? He's staying, he's going to do the work, or he won't get paid.
So before I let you go, Lonnie, I'm curious what you think. Do you think that this trend toward massive milestone-based CEO pay packages could reshape how leadership is incentivized across the auto industry or even beyond? Or do you think that this is a pretty specific thing to companies like Tesla and Rivian that are so tied to software and, like you said, Silicon Valley?
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure how many new automotive startups we're going to see, in the future. Maybe we'll see more, built around robotaxis, or built around mobility, or built around robots or other types of things. And then those obviously would be structured more like a tech company, right? With, all that comes with in terms of, payouts and executive compensation. But I think for right now, like in terms of auto companies, I think these are kind of, these are companies that are kind of in between worlds, right? They're kind of in between the auto industry, where you'd say, wait, that's way too much money. But they're kind of getting into the tech industry, or they want to get further into the tech industry, with Rivian. And so, they're saying, well, I want to, kind of structure some of that like a tech company and get in on that. But obviously, if there's more companies that are structured like tech companies, yeah, they're going to want that compensation package.
All right. Well, Lawrence Iliff covers Tesla, Rivian, and other automakers for us here at Automotive News. Lonnie, thank you so much for joining us on Daily Drive.
Great to be here.
That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News journalists Jerry Hirsch, Yang John, and Larry Velaquette for their reporting for today's podcast. You can get the latest news on CEO compensation, the Nexperia chip crisis, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. Come back tomorrow for a conversation with KPMG's Lenny LaRocca about the volatility in the auto supply chain throughout this year and what the road ahead looks like for suppliers, automakers, and EV investments.
Now you're starting to see the OEMs and suppliers move into like, what's my medium and long-term strategy, right? Like, obviously it's not sustainable to continue to pay significant tariff costs. So what do I need to do to start to move production, move my strategy to respond to these actions?
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.